All right, so in this one, we're going to talk about the importance of phenotypic variation in a population and how that leads to changes over time. So we're going to talk about a couple different things. The first one is we're going to talk about mutations. So mutations are changes in the DNA. And any change in the actual DNA of an organism is going to be able to be passed on to the next generation. And it's also going to cause a change in phenotype. So phenotype is a characteristic or what the organism looks like. Does the organism have brown hair? Does it have blonde hair? Is the organism tall? Is it short? Are they able to run faster because they have better muscle movement? Those are all phenotypes, what the organism looks like. And that's due to, your phenotype is due to changes in the DNA or mutations that occur over time. It's due to what your genotype is, what your DNA is. We're mostly going to stay in this unit on the phenotype level, and then later we're going to circle back around at the end of the year and come back and talk about those DNA changes. And so because of that, and because of natural selection, and because mutations are random, and we never know when they might occur, we never know when they might get passed on, we get a lot of variation. So it's just like the variation is just the amount of diversity in a population, or the amount of different looking organisms in a population. And that variation can lead, and those phenotypes lead to adaptations. Adaptations are ways organisms survive, phenotypes that allow organisms to survive. So we know that Darwin says that it's random what mutations you might occur, it's random what you might look like, but if that mutation, it gives you a favorable advantage in surviving, there's a differential survival. So if that mutation gives you a favorable advantage in surviving, you're going to be able to survive and reproduce and pass on that adaptation. So our adaptations are phenotypes that help an organism to survive. So maybe you're a little bit taller, so you can reach taller trees. Maybe we're going to look at some other ones, so they help an organism to survive. So we're going to look at a couple types of natural selection. So the first one we're going to look at, I'm going to zoom in just so you guys can see it a little bit more on your screen. So there is directional selection. So in this one, there is a positive, so that's a positive selection pressure, meaning there's an advantage to being this. So in this case, these are snails in this example, and there's an advantage to being light colored. Maybe it's more sandy, it's a whiter colored sand, and so these dark guys are going to die off. They're not going to make it, and over time, these ones are able to survive and reproduce, and so your population gets less variation, but those ones are the ones that are able to survive. So we're going to see less variation. And more survival towards one extreme. And then in this one, stabilizing selection, we're seeing a negative selection. See that? So we're going to not select for the two extremes. So in this case, it's not an advantage to be light colored, and it's not an advantage to be dark colored. Maybe the sand's this medium color. So we're going to kind of select for this middle ground there. Okay. And so over time, those middle ones are going to see that, and we're going to see more survival in the middle. And then the last type of selection here is what we call diversifying, or a lot of times it's actually called disruptive. So I would make sure you know that it's also known as disruptive, so you're going to see that. And there's a positive selection pressure for both extremes. Both the light colored and the dark color are going to survive, and this middle one is going to get taken out. Okay, so we're going to see what you're going to see in this case. A lot of times you see two new populations start to form, or two different phenotypes are selected for that are extremely different. Maybe the one's really small and one's really big. Maybe one's really light colored, one's really dark colored. Something like that. So you're going to see this disruptive selection, and you get selection for the extremes. Okay, and we're going to see this again in class too. And so just an example of how the phenotypic variation in a population, we're going to talk about sickle cell anemia. And we're going to actually see this again in class in a couple weeks too. So sickle cell anemia is a weird trait. So if you are like this, so you have both the recessive traits, you're homozygous recessive, we say, meaning you have both of those recessive traits. You have sickle cell anemia, which, depending on where you live, can kill you. If you don't have good, proper medical treatment, you don't bring enough oxygen to your blood cell or your tissues, and you can die. Okay? If you are like this, and I purposely left a gap there in my writing, if you are like this, you are homozygous dominant, and you have no sickle cell. Now, there's an interesting phenomenon that occurs in sub-Saharan Africa with the people that are like this. These are heterozygous folk. And so they have both the dominant and the recessive trait. They don't have sickle cell, so no sickle cell, but they are resistant to malaria. So if you live in a part of the world that has malaria, there's actually a higher frequency. We see more of these heterozygotes, and we see more of actually even sickle cell populations, more homozygous recessive, because there's actually an advantage to having that little a allele. So it maintains in the population. Whereas if you're big A, the whole time, you don't have sickle cell, sure, but you also could get malaria, which is like a giant problem, right? So we're actually you guys are going to do a little simulation in class with each other where you're going to mimic a population. And so you'll be able to see how that change can occur with the phenotypic variation. So that's going to come up in like a week or two for you guys. Okay, so that's just the idea of having a lot of variation in a population and why that's important. And different factors that can affect our phenotypic variation.